Hi, Brian. Thank you for coming onto my podcast today. We're going to be talking about a very important subject. I think it's important to me. I have three brothers, and I know just the community out there of men who have challenges trying to express their feelings. So I met, I'm not sure who was at the Indigenous Day event, but you guys had a booth there for
There's
Men's Shed.
probably Punch Jackson
Okay.
or Morris Reed. There's many of us.
Yeah. So I saw that and I had to ask questions, and I thought, you know what, I need you guys on my podcast because we have to have these conversations. So we are here to talk about mental health for men today, right? Anyone, regardless of gender, can struggle with that mental health, and but men also struggle with it. I find, right? They have struggle reaching out for support sometimes, right? Because most men are told to man up. But we know that's dangerous. I actually ended up watching a CBC documentary called "Digging in the Dirt." So it had to do with mental health, men in the oil patch,
Right.
and I think it was a powerful documentary because we saw that as a result of men manning up or hiding their feelings, many things happened: suicide. Drugs, alcohol, prostitution, abuse, taking it out on their loved ones. So I think it's a very important subject, a topic that we're going to be talking about today. But first, we need to hear your story and how it relates to Men's Shed. So please go ahead.
Well, thanks, Malida. Thanks very much for having me. My name is Brian Sawyer.
Yes.
I'm from here in Edmonton. I'm on the board for Edmonton Men's Shed Association. And also I'm the program manager for Men's Sheds Canada.
Okay.
And so, and just about, there's 3,000 sheds across the world.
Oh, wow.
So my story is my story.
Yeah.
But in those 3,000 sheds, everyone is different. And of course, every man in there is different. And if there's 20, if this is 50,000 shedders out there.
Yeah.
So I can
That's
tell you my
great.
perspective.
Yes,
and I'd be
please.
glad to. I guess growing up here in in Alberta, I grew up my roots are from pioneers, folks who worked the land and worked very hard and had to every day.
Wow.
And big family, but they all had to chip in. And it was really about staying alive in the first place and then maybe getting ahead. So it was very much a work ethic.
Right.
And so we were taught to keep our nose to the grindstone.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no room for... well, I don't know if I can do this, or I don't know. I'm kind of afraid if I can't do that. Feelings really, as you said, weren't on the table for very much for most of my life, and that's just the culture that we grew up in.
Right.
And that's the homesteader culture, and even though I grew up in the city, it carried. It's a generational thing.
Right. Yep.
So that's one of the factors that contributed to the men in my life never did talk about their feelings.
Right.
And so there was some dysfunction and there's some trauma in my history, going way back. One of my grandfathers was abusive, and another one abandoned his family.
Wow.
And so that was something that I grew up with and kind of had to live down.
Right.
I'm going to say they couldn't express themselves, so they took it out on their families, or they abandoned them.
Right.
So I spent much of my life, I guess, reacting in reaction mode to that. I'm not going to be that. I'm not the kind of guy who abandons. So I will stick to it to the end.
Oh,
and that's that's the short version of my story. But very much focused on work, doing well, and supporting other people, being very supportive.
Yeah.
So I come across and have come across as a very nice man.
You do appear that way.
And therefore, but sometimes to the detriment of myself. I will serve others first before me.
Oh.
So that's just in my nature. But I very much liked I found the company of men. I searched out men's support groups, men's groups. I just like talking to men about things that are not about hockey or farming.
Good for you.
Or business. There's a few deeper things than that.
Yeah.
And found a number of groups in my life over about 3 decades. One of them was very intense, sort of in-your-face personal development group.
Oh.
And that's where we really dealt with our trauma from our lives, our previous lives, but really facing what it was that was stopping us, our hurdles in life, our emotional hurdles that we never got around, and the negative self-thoughts that we grew up with. And so that's really deep, intense personal work. Works for a lot of us, some of us. That doesn't work for most men. That's a little too confrontational.
Right.
So while I really enjoyed sitting in circle with men, and I've been in hundreds of circles with men that are about doing deep personal work, that leaves out a whole lot, most of the majority of men who do not, that just scares them away.
Wow.
And really they maybe don't need to do deep personal work. But there's a lot of men who would like to have a chat like we're having right now that is about personal things in a safe place.
Oh my God.
And that's the important thing, is in a safe place with other men.
Yeah.
Now, for some reason, I'm not saying that that women make it unsafe, but there's certain things that men share.
Absolutely.
That,
I agree. Yeah.
Our experience, especially men of my age, grew up in an environment where it wasn't necessarily there was all kinds of reasons to be not proud of being a man, frankly.
Oh, wow.
With the rise of feminism.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's domestic violence, which we didn't hear about in my early life, but we're hearing more and more about now.
Yeah.
And usually it's the men who are the perpetrators and women who are victims.
Right.
Not always, but in general.
Yeah.
And we've also heard about how men take it out on themselves. They do personal harm, self-harm.
Yeah.
They're 3 times more likely to commit suicide than women.
Right.
And so I think it's a bit of a generalization, but most of us keep our feelings stuffed in. And so that's not exactly what Men's Sheds is about, but what it does is it motivated me to find a group that was not so personal, not so challenging, but actually find a group of guys who just want to sit down, make some new friends, get out of their isolation, because COVID isolated a lot of us.
Oh, man, yes.
And so we're all sitting in our apartments, and we start to realize how much we missed because we weren't meeting with each other.
Yeah.
So I found this group called, I was going to start a new Men's Shed where we just talk.
Yeah.
I found Men's Sheds. And it turns out that that's what we do. We actually work on things, but we also talk. So it's really about taking on projects. We work on projects, and we're working shoulder to shoulder. That's the term we use, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
But as we start building things and getting to know each other, we can start having those more personal conversations.
Oh, I love that.
And so it's about connection, and it's about safe connection, and then there's some magic happens when guys get together.
Yeah.
Nothing against women, but when guys get together, start to build things or fix things.
Yeah.
It's a shared experience, and they start to, as we're repairing something that's old and broken.
Yeah.
Guess who else we're repairing?
Oh, that's lovely.
You know, like it's like we're validating ourselves.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of getting deep about it. But I think that's in the end, a lot of guys like together and do something useful. This is about purposeful connection.
Yeah.
So doing something for the community.
Oh,
so
nice.
Initially we gather and we build stuff for ourselves, but guess what? We end up building benches for Indigenous groups or somewhere out in the community, like where you met some fellas.
Yeah.
And that feels good. And all of a sudden, many of us retired or for one reason or another. Well, this gives us a new sense of purpose, and we just love giving back, frankly.
Wow.
Men are very giving people when you give them the chance. So that's my experience of Men's Sheds. And a whole other people men have shared the same thing. The reason we get together is we like to there's a place to go, someone to talk to, something to do.
To do, yeah.
And that's the highlight of their week.
Oh.
And so they know they've got that coming up every week. We get there, we build something, we have some fun. Maybe we just talk all day and don't build anything.
Yeah, that's okay too.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
But the point is that we gather. And so that's kind of that's how it works for the members. But as I see it, like we have 100 sheds now in Canada. You've got a whole bunch of older men. We don't restrict it to older men, but a lot of men who have a lot of capability, who are doing projects in their community, who are kind of moving into their regaining some of their pride in what they do and using their skills, and they can start mentoring They start mentoring younger men.
Yeah.
They can start teaching women to build things,
Yeah.
use power saws, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be all about older men. So
Yeah.
we're now incorporating younger men into our groups.
Oh.
We're expanding out, trying to increase our diversity. And there are small sheds that just are 5 or 6 guys meeting
Yeah.
for coffee. There's big sheds where there's 120 men.
Oh.
So they have to come just every night of the week. You can't have 120
Yeah.
guys together.
Yeah.
And they build stuff, and they sell things, and they refurbish things, and they have stores, and they turn into a huge in a huge endeavor
Yeah.
that involves so many men in these communities, and that's having a big impact on their community.
Yeah.
So sheds are of every color. And that's just in Canada. You know, there's 3,000. Started in Australia, moved to Ireland and England, and I've been to some sheds in England.
Wow.
Love it. It's usually 10 or 20 guys getting together, doing something small in their communities, and it's a place to be. And I really just enjoy being in their company. That's the selfish part for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also I enjoy creating opportunities for sheds to grow. For other
Wow.
sheds to grow. So I like to go out and talk to people about starting a shed in
Yeah.
Negreville, where there's one now just starting up,
Nice.
or maybe in Morinville, where they're interested. We have about 25 or 20 sheds today. I bet we have 30 in a year from now in Alberta.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's an idea, I guess, whose time has come.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
And our biggest advocates are women, frankly.
Yeah.
They want to send their wives or their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, their sons.
Yeah.
Because they know that men need to get together, and that once we do, we really enjoy, we really blossom.
Yeah.
And at least that's the case for me.
So I think I like the fact that women are advocates of this. I would be an advocate too, because I see the importance for not just everyone's mental health, right?
Yep.
If you take care of yourself through these men's shed, you're transferring that energy, that positive energy, over to your loved ones too, right?
Yep.
That's really quite amazing.
That's right. And we have on our board of directors nationally, we have a woman who's just decided she'll be on the board because it was such an impact on her husband.
Oh, wow.
And that's what we find. Women are big supporters. And even in my community, even in my local community of Ritchie here in town,
Yeah.
the women community leaders are sending their men, and they're just supporting us, and they give us a free space to work in.
Oh my gosh.
They realize the need, and we actually take care of the community hall now in my shed. So we have a lot to give back, and there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah.
So Men's Shed seems like a lot of people are hearing about it now. And
That's good.
All positive.
Yeah, that's good. So you talk about the demographics within Men's Shed. Now, is this just in Edmonton here? Do you find that like there's a lot of older men, and you're trying to bring in the younger men to mentor? Talk about that a little bit.
That's the sort of the evolution of the shed.
Yeah.
It often starts out with older retired guys,
Right.
who maybe are widowed or retired, or for some reason they're on their own, and they get together and start building things. But it happened to me. We're working on something, and some guys walk by and say, "Well, what are you doing?"
Oh, nice.
Some younger guys, and say, "Can we help?" Like,
Oh, really?
can we? So half of my shed, which is only 10 or 12 guys, are older like myself, but half of them are younger, in their 30s and 40s.
Oh, nice.
And so it's a real mix. And then we even have some younger guys who want to come in.
Nice.
In their teens or 20s, because maybe nobody ever taught them about using tools or equipment. They kind of live in a virtual world.
Yeah.
That's not where we're at.
Yeah, good.
We're in the hands-on world.
Good.
Sort of concrete. We're standing on the ground. We're working with real things in life. That's somehow, to me, a little more genuine and real about life than virtual.
I agree, because even with my son, he's like, they're in the gaming world, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there is a purpose in that unless you're like at the top. I did watch a documentary on a lot of things, and I've seen documentaries on gamers, and usually the families are, unless they're making $1 million, are not big advocates of it, right? So we don't want to go that route, obviously, for many reasons. I know a few of my friends whose sons just stay in the gaming room, and that's
Yeah.
it all day. So
Yeah.
like I said, I don't see a lot of purpose in it. My son does connect with some of his friends, but I would prefer to see the hands-on experience. Absolutely. So,
An in-person connection.
you need that.
Communication is 3/4 body language.
Yes. Yep.
So I get a lot more talking to somebody in person than on Zoom, even though I'm their face on in Zoom.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting in a room like I am here with you,
Yeah.
a lot of the communication is how we sit.
Oh, it's so much better. And I agree, because I do have some of my virtual podcasts, but I always say, I would prefer in person, because I get your energy better, right?
Yep.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yep.
So, let's talk about men's mental health in general. You delved in a little bit about the challenges. Can you expand more, especially, compared to, in the past and what it's like now?
Well, I'd like to think that things are improving now. There's gender issue. The old gender roles are kind of dissolving. If a man can be a better man, it's usually about being more nurturing, about being more present,
Right.
and more engaging. And I think that's you no longer have to go out there and hunt the buffalo and drag him home.
Right.
That's not required. And because we also have this history of the toxic part of masculinity, we need to tone. I'm not saying we need to, but a lot of men are choosing to tone that down and focus more on what's important, which is about being a family man.
Oh, nice.
Or being somebody who's respectful and responsible and caring.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to think that the incidences of domestic violence are going down, which would be nice
Yes.
if that was true. I think we have a long ways to go there. I would like to think that men have some place, that men in general are not keeping things in, so therefore it doesn't come out sideways,
Right.
or that they just decide it's not worthwhile to take their own lives.
Through their actions.
Through their actions. There's so many reasons to be down, out there in the world. But I guess the mental health is really about emotional health. How am I handling it? Is it okay to be angry sometimes about things? Because there are things that do make me angry. Is it okay to be sad about some things? My gosh, there's so many things. But if I can be sad, then I can be joyful as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's about expanding the range, at least for me. And again, I'm just speaking about me, but this has resonated with a lot of other men. It's okay to talk about how we're feeling. It's really makes life richer.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I agree, because if you hold it in, like I said, to me that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? You've got it inside of you. I was just telling my last podcast that I had a guest from Venezuela, and I heard his story twice, through the Living Library at the university and through my podcast. And he was still very emotional talking about it.
Yep.
And what had happened after the podcast, after we recorded, I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Oh God, yes, of course I'm okay. Every time I talk about it, I feel better."
Yes.
And I think that's important, right?
Well, as it turns out, sitting in circle, talking about it, whatever the issue is, and we all have issues, we all have wounds, but if we talk about it and share it with somebody else, with other men, all of a sudden it kind of gets lighter.
Yes.
Well, that's one thing, sharing it. The second thing is the other guy says, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about."
Yes.
It's the same for me.
The understanding. Yeah.
My wife passed away and I don't know what the heck to do with myself.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden there's a connection there and I'm not alone. And that's where the group dynamic then really helps men say, "Well, I'm really not alone. Other guys know what I'm talking about.
Wow.
Other guys have the same issues." But that's just part of the men's shed. That's about the issue, the mental health side. There's the positive mental health of taking a role in the community again.
Yeah.
Instead of being isolated away and feeling redundant,
Right.
taking a role, doing something good, having people say, "Well, thank you for doing that," also kind of gives us a purpose and regains, in our life, we can either treat our elders as people who are elderly, or we can respect them as elders.
Yes.
And the same for us older guys. We can either take on the role of a victim or somebody left behind, or we can take on the elder role.
Yeah.
Which means I have a responsibility to give back.
Oh.
And I think that's what a lot of men just do unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that's so lovely. So where do you see what is the future of Men's Shed? Like you see that obviously growing.
Yeah.
What are the projects or initiatives you have planned for this great group?
Well, they're just popping up all over the place. So initially, we're just supporting. Now I put my Men's Sheds Canada hat on. Initially, we have like 100 sheds, and we want to get maybe 150 by the end of the year.
Sure.
But that's individual sheds, and we want to help them to get started. But just like individual men getting together as a group, what about sheds as groups? What about starting community, online communities where men can talk to each other? I can show up in Fort St. John and show up to a shed or something. We want to start creating communities of sheds.
Yeah.
That's one thing, because instead of 100 points of light, that can be a network of light. So we want to start creating more sharing between sheds and visiting between sheds.
Nice.
There's also naturally, of course, what's going to come out of this is that women will say, well, what about us? Why can't you have a she shed? Well, you can. And in England and in Australia, they've started their own she sheds where they get together and do projects. So, and there can be we're hoping there can be other kinds of sheds that are cultural sheds. That are focused more on about regaining cultural pride rather than building things. And so there's all kinds of room for this to expand into what a community needs and what a group of people needs.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But if it's about giving back, and I don't want to put any other groups around, but often it's getting together and having a drink and complaining.
Right.
That's not what we're about.
Right.
We're about actually giving back.
Yeah.
And to ourselves, but also to the community. And I don't see why that would ever stop.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a flame that started growing. And
it's a beautiful flame.
It's growing, yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And I'm learning more about what Men's Shed is all about now through this conversation.
And there's certainly a lot of older men out there. So the idea is catching on.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, we move the demographic downwards.
Yeah.
We start mentoring. We start supporting younger men who could then move outwards and have an influence.
Right.
So hopefully it's I don't know where it'll ever end. And it's been going for 30 years in Australia.
Wow.
It just keeps expanding.
Oh, that's amazing.
In
no,
Canada,
it's not going to end for sure.
No.
It's something that's needed continuously forever.
Yep.
Wow.
And so hopefully the government will realize that there has never been mental health of senior men, of older men, has never been identified. We've never been a vulnerable group, just because they think of us as a majority, not a minority.
Oh.
But so they never actually focused anything on for senior men. So we hope that, sooner or later, or we convince them that, in fact, senior men are a vulnerable group. That they do tend to more towards isolation. They need programs nationally or provincially. And they need funding for those programs.
Right.
So that it's not just the Men's Sheds movement, which we're all volunteers, almost all volunteers.
Yeah.
So hopefully the governments will start to see the light and support us.
Gosh, that is important. Oh, wow. Wow, what a great story that you've just told about men's mental health. My goodness. Yeah. Wow.
And yet it all starts with a small group of guys.
Yeah.
And that's what's really important, is the shed itself thrives because the guys want it to.
Oh.
So I can't make another shed work. It's them who will make it work. But once they come to see our sheds, they say, yeah, we could do some of that.
Yeah.
And so sheds will be popping up for years and years and years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, before we finish here, I have a very important question to ask you.
Yeah.
And that is, Brian, what matters to you the most?
Well, family matters to me the most, and community matters to me the most. So despite all the things that are going on out there that are reasons to shiny, whether they're shiny objects or they're black doom, that doesn't have to influence how I work in my community or with my friends, or how the communities work with themselves, and to build something positive.
Right.
So it's all about connection, a good, safe connection, but fruitful connection, and inviting others in.
Oh.
So that's to me. I'll just say that's a bit of a transition. I used to think that I was on the outside.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in my younger life, I've learned to invite men in, or invite people in.
Oh.
So it's a whole other perspective.
Wow.
That's what Men's Sheds is about inviting men in.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow. Well, thank you so much
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
this incredible discussion. And yeah, we need to get more men out there, more males out there for Men's
Yeah.
Shed. I think it's important. Let's have those conversations and keep going.
And if you want to know more about us,
Yeah.
just Google us, Men's Sheds,
Yep.
and you'll find us.
Yes.
Men's Sheds Canada. Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Brian.
Melida. Thanks for having me. Yeah.